Thank you. It's a long title, and maybe we're going to try to work out to see how we can solve the complexities and address the issues that we've heard even from the Professor Bamflet's presentation dealing with sustainability. So, yes, I'm Costas Balaras. I represent also a team of co-authors for this work. And to give proper credit, this is part of a European project financed by Interact Mediterranean. The project is called SESBAMED Sustainable Cities, and I give you the link. And that's where I stop referring to the specifics, but you have the coordinates. So, well, what we're dealing with is sustainability, and we saw the official definition. We realized from Bill's presentation the complexity of the issues, and that pretty much sets the stage of what this work is all about, because we're not just dealing with energy, we're not just dealing with environment that is impacted with emissions in various forms, the natural resources, the society in general, and focusing on the urban systems. And that pretty much at the center stage, because it impacts action, reaction, and progress, is related to economy. So the key to all this, and in an event that we had the other day presenting the progress that we have made, I had a great response from the mayor of Vrilicia that was participating in this event, that kind of like said and stated that yes, sustainability is about everything. So that pretty much, and I feel very comfortable with this definition that he gave, because it simplifies a complex issue. And what is everything and what is hidden behind can be various things. And already, recognizing the importance of these issues, the UN Environment Med Action Plan is working on addressing these issues in our part of the world. Actually, this is, as you see here, the only UN body which is headquarters is in Athens, Greece. So we're very close to them. So this work in the high level, at the 30,000 feet level, setting the Mediterranean strategy for sustainable development, it kind of really gives us a flavor of what are we trying to do and address. This is the easier said than done in terms of committing and making plans, but also the implementation and the assessment is very important. The fact being that the investment in the environment is the best way to secure long-term sustainable job creation, socioeconomic development. So there can be growth, and they can be means to address all this in a sustainable manner moving forward. Now, part of this plan and part of this introduction, see how it well links together with this UN effort. As you see, just focusing on a number of sustainable development goals that have been set in the official agenda for sustainable development. It has a total of 17 goals and 169 targets, and part of them are really linked to what we're talking about, and especially here emphasizing the need to plan and manage sustainable Mediterranean cities. So in this spirit, as you see already, we're just kind of like drawing the footsteps, this path from the higher level up, where, for example, we have the UN Sustainable Development Goals, moving down to the European Union level, where they add more targets, more goals, and moving forward. Now, the basic axis of this very important indicators, ideas, goals, whatever you want to call them. We call them KPIs. They're very essential, kind of like having the spine of this effort. And as we move and we come closer to implementation at national level, setting our goals at regional level, then we come down to the main players where we have a municipality or a city developing and adding additional objectives, additional targets, additional indicators in order of expressing them. And of course now it starts getting complex because we're adding more and more and more. And while it is good to think globally, we need to act locally in order to have and achieve our objectives. So that pretty much sets the stage. What we're talking about is a number of issues, a number of indicators that we can use to quantify issues. For example, when we're talking about energy, how do we communicate? We said some form of energy per unit floor area if we're talking about buildings. So that way we have that indicator, we can benchmark it, we can understand how big the problem is or how good the performance is. And that extends also to other natural resources like water consumption, to other effluents and emissions like CO2 emissions, environmental impact, altogether with recycling, with waste disposal, how much we produce, with transportation, how many people use public transportation, and so forth. For all of these issues, we have these different indicators, and at the end, we have different benchmarks in order to be able to rank them. So, the whole idea now of this effort is to develop some kind of a common language so that we can communicate. We can set and have a common perception, understanding of the sustainability issues. Once we have this kind of a system, we can monitor, assess our current situation and monitor our progress and how things are being evolving. We can share examples because that way we can see what another city is doing in the country, in a different country, and be able to understand how we can use their implementation stages in a better manner. And this, we are trying to do it at a different level. We start from the easier part of the problem, the building, but then you might go to bigger scales, more buildings, and you go to a neighborhood, and you go to a city, and of course, from there on, you go into a different kind of a problem where you're talking about building stocks and so forth. So, how can you have some kind of a support in trying to do the implementation and help you in the decision-making process while addressing all these complex issues? How you can actually improve the process, improve your planning, and of course, hopefully the implementation, and do all that while having your own tool. Having and being able to adopt, not kind of like take from the top-down approach something that you have to use and you're forcing your policy. This in a lower cost, with a lower cost, being able to use your in-house technical experts, professional people, without needing very much high specialization. So simplifying it. And overall, what is important and kind of like is lost from there in terms of the slide, unfortunately it's cutting part of the slide, it says local ownership, so that you have a sense that this is a tool that can work for me and it's being adopted for me with the flexibility to meet the local needs and priorities. Now, summarizing all this, what we tried to do is to develop a transnational, meaning this is a collaborative effort with different Mediterranean countries. Multicriteria, meaning trying to address all the different issues and aspects of sustainability. Being able to rate in a coherent manner, in a coherent system, different scales, buildings, up to neighborhoods, parts of the cities. In a decision-making process that can help us address the complexity, as we said before, when you're going to a bigger scale, considering a lot of buildings that compose or being part of your urban environment in general. And that poses opportunities, but it also has the challenges in terms of adding the complexity. How we did this in terms of the different collaborative efforts, first of all, we didn't discover the wheel. So we looked at what has been available with already public systems. Some of them were within European projects. A lot of work has been done. So what and how we started was to collect all this knowledge and this know-how. Then there was a lot of work that already we have to take into consideration because it's starting, and it is called levels. This is the new European effort in order to include some specific, and we'll see a slide of what this is all about because it's going to impact on how we design, we construct buildings in Europe in the near future. This is an ongoing process. Then we had the opportunity to collaborate with local experts. So in every participating country, including Greece, there were local committee experts set up. And these individuals, experts in their fields, helped us and support us in taking the specific steps in this work. It also involved dialogue with the citizens. This is a key issue in terms of really understanding the needs of what we're trying to do from the people's, the citizens' perspectives. And also there was already one major sprint workshop that was done and bringing together experts from different European programs to review the progress and the work. And that is also coming up, another one's coming up in Malta in a couple of weeks, where exactly looking at this from a higher level European perspective, trying to make sure that it is really addressing, as we say, the issues and the concerns. In a footnote, I would like to bring your attention, those involved in building construction and operation, that already the so-called key performance indicators are all being developed, specified in a European effort. It's actually led by JRC. And what this is all about is to specify what will be mandatory, necessary to report in terms of the sustainability performance of, and starting with office buildings and residential buildings. This work is already in progress, is being tested and under public consultation. And part of this work, part of this project, we are also integrating these indicators in the overall approach. So in terms of an organized European project testing, this is the first one. And there is, along this line, a direct collaboration with Director General Environment. I'll turn the page and say, well, just tell us a little bit more of the specifics of what's really behind this idea. Well, if nothing else, the most critical element is organizing a vast amount of information and being able to match the different concepts, the pillars of sustainability, the issues of sustainability, for example, energy, for example, environment, for example, socioeconomic issues, or the economy, with specifics which set the categories, the specific elements. When we're talking, for example, for energy, the specific category would be renewables. It could be primary energy and so forth. And then link this with specific criteria and indicators. In other words, with the parameters, with a numeric value, with specific units that would best describe and be able to quantify where you are in terms of your achievements with this, with all these issues that we're trying to address. So this is the big picture of both the building scale and the neighborhood scale. It gives you as you see, the main issues. There are 7 of them in both scales, and the different categories with, of course, then having different indicators within them that make the overall structure of the method. Now, I talked quite a bit about indicators, and I specified that there are some mandatory minimum requirements of indicators that we have in each of these issues and categories. In other words, if you want to address sustainability, then as a minimum, you have to address these specific criteria and indicators. These are the KPIs. So the KPIs are mandatory, are the specific, and as you see, in both scale, the building scale, there are 16 of them, the minimum. From there on, the general structure framework includes, as you see, 178 for the neighborhood scale, 154 general criteria and indicators that you can select from, and depending on your priorities, on your goals and objectives, and so forth. So, under the Greek flag, you see what we have done in our effort to adopt this process, this work in Greece. We have actually selected the 7 issues, of course, covering sustainability remain the same, 16 categories and 31 indicators that are integrated. Now, some of them, as we said, the KPIs are the core, the minimum. You have to do them. You can select from there on, depending on your priorities, different number in terms of addressing where things are going. Now, behind the tool, there has been already a lot of effort, a lot of work in order to be able to quantify and actually benchmark and be able to give a single scoring scale to the complexity of the various sustainability issues and indicators we're trying to address. In other words, how good or how bad is so much energy per unit floor area? 178 kilowatt hours per square meter, is it good or is it bad? Should be able to give it a grade. Different indicators have different units. So, depending on your numerical value of indicator, we have defined a scale from 0 to 5, assigning specific limits. The 0 is the minimum code low requirement. Below that, if you have a value below that, then your score would be -1. Ideally, the goal, the objective, is to reach 5. This would be the ideal situation. Anywhere in between, then, depending on your numerical value indicator, you normalize it so you get finally a score that would not have any units, but it would quantify, would be able to communicate your level of performance. Now, some of them would be that you increase the numerical value, then you can have a better performance. For example, how much you're exploiting using renewables. The more renewables you use as a percentage, the higher your score would be. But you see, there would be also situations where the reverse would be true, desirable. The lower would be the best optimum. So you see a situation here where you're starting with the minimum code requirements of energy, the amount of energy per unit floor area that your building should consume. For example, in Greece and throughout Europe, for new buildings, we have the level B, which represents the specific energy use. And the lower, reaching NZ, for example, would get the higher score 5. So in that situation, the lower values are higher. All this information then go together into a passport, which means for the building and the neighborhood, we have all the information, all the KPIs that we can share and we can exchange between us in order to be able to really share this knowledge, this information. Why is it important to keep in mind that when you're cross-comparing, not just using yourself, it is important to follow the same methodology, the same calculation approach, and so forth. So the KPIs follow strict regulation, strict description and definition of how you perform the calculation according to European standards and so forth, so we can put them in this manner and be able to use and compare the metrics between us. Very quickly, and we're not going to go into the details of how this tool is being used and so forth, but I would focus on a couple of slides. First of all, it is going to be a multilingual tool, which means it's going to be available in different languages. Here you see the one we're already setting up for Greece. But the beginning has the main issues. That's where you're setting your policies, you're setting your main priorities. For all the different issues, you give it a weighting factor from 1 to 3, 3 being the most important of impacting and assessing your results at the end with more emphasis on the specific issues that your area is requiring. Then you may come and select the different criteria, the different indicators that we set. So you can select or unselect some of them that are not really meaningful, are not really useful. What you cannot, and you will always have to address, of course they're fixed, are the 16 KPIs. And in there, you also have the opportunity for the indicators now, not just for the issues, for the big pillars of sustainability, but for the specific indicators. If you want to place more emphasis, then you can adjust the weighting factor so that in your analysis is being considered more. For every indicator, then, you have to provide a numeric value. What you have as background, you have a good description, you have a good definition, you have a description of the calculation method of how things are being done and handled. As I said before, for the KPIs are according to the European standards, following the same common methodology so that the results can be comparable. And there, you provide your numerical value. For each indicator, you have to calculate, for example, what is the energy use of your buildings, and then for your area, neighborhood, city. And there, you have the benchmarks where you compare your performance for what is already being set up in the tool, in the approach. But there, you can also adjust and adapt. For example, we were talking with the city of Athens, and they have, for example, and you know very well, in this area that you have buildings that have some historic value, that they have some specific limitations. So then the benchmarks, in this case, they have to be adjusted. And that's where the place where you can do that, again, giving a better fit to the specific needs of the area. At the end, you have a score. You have the spider diagram where you can try different scenarios in terms of how well am I addressing, how well am I progressing with my sustainability goals, in terms of all the different issues that we have and the specific scores, and at the end, some information that you can easily communicate with non-experts in terms of where we are, how we're progressing, or where we would like to go, and be able to quantify and score this, taking into account all your national priorities, local priorities, needs, and policies, and so forth. There is more support in terms of how do we take this now to users, municipalities, cities, or public authorities that have under their ownership build a number of buildings, and they would like to move along the sustainability path and so forth. There's a lot of educational material that has been developed, again multi-legal. It's going to be free, open, electronic, available, accessible, so that then this can be taken and used and integrated in terms of educating, training your own technical department and so forth. Already, we had a seminar along these lines that we organized in Athens earlier this week, actually, on Tuesday. And these are going on actually throughout the participating countries. And there will also be courses in terms of how do I do this kind of work in order to be able to easier advance. Altogether, it's going to be a toolkit, open, free, available, electronic, that you can take and use. In terms, though, of all the work, I think what I've described are the processes of all the steps, but this is the important part, right here. that you can, at the end, using this system, this tool, have your own tool for your city, for your organization, for the public authority, and so forth. All this is right now being tested in 9 cities, 9 neighborhoods in the participating Mediterranean countries. And the idea after all this is to make sure that we have something useful and practical to use, because this decision-making process, and briefly the big picture is being described here, that we have these 2 tools that can support you both at the building scale and then at the neighborhood urban scale to start preparing, organizing the information that you have, making the diagnosis, defining your constraints and your targets, whatever that would be, any legal constraints, any technical constraints that would help you build the best scenarios, and at the end have the rating and the selection in order to make your final plan. And even after implementation, if that proceeds, you can still come back and use all this information that's already now organized for your city, for your neighborhood, to be able to monitor progress even after implementation in terms of achieving and meeting the targets and satisfying the policies. I'm sure, and I'm going to be leaving you with this opportunity, that you may have some great examples already. Let's make sure you get recognized. This is an ongoing opportunity for a neighborhood award, showcasing all the great things that may have happened. It's not just for Mediterranean countries, it includes, it's throughout Europe, but being in Greece, and specifically in Greece, if you, as a consultant, as an engineer, you have worked with a city to renovate in a sustainable manner, or make a plan of a part of a city or a big number of urban environment, this is the opportunity. As you see, there are different categories for small and bigger cities, for new designs, for implemented designs, and or renovation. So there is a great variety. All can enter this process. Everything is being done and handled electronically. You can find at the website that I gave you the link at the beginning, the very specific information. But if there's any interested, please let me know at the end, and I'll be happy to provide you with the specifics and make sure that we have really good representation in this award by participants from Greece. So thank you very much for your attention, and it was a great pleasure of being here one more time. Thank you.